Welcome back to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and today I got the late Dr. Carter G. Woodson on my chest. I'm saying it with my chest with Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder and creator of Negro History Week, I believe back in 1926, which later, many years later, was kind of rebranded and expanded into what we now know as Black History Month, which takes place in the month of February. And he originally had Negro History Week in the month of February, which spanned from, it was the week between Frederick Douglass's birthday and Abraham Lincoln's birthday. All right. As a reminder of all the work that we as Black people need to do to recover and study our history that was lost during the transatlantic slave trade and during our separation from our homeland, right? All the work that needs to be done to recover our past history and also what we need to be planning to do in the future, all right? To also do that, because it's an ongoing thing. So I just want to be clear, just want to put that out there just so we'll be aware of the fact that the purpose of Negro History Week, which later became Black History Month, was not for us to just only spend the month of February, or just to only study our history during the month of February. That was not Dr. Carter G. Woodson's intent at all. The study of our history is a daily activity, is a weekly activity, is a monthly activity, is a yearly activity. It's perennial, right? It's perennial, right? We should be doing it constantly. That time was just designated as a time to reflect on what we have accomplished in the previous year and what we should plan to do in the upcoming year. And we should do this every year. All right. So anyway, we're going to do some more work with consumer math. And we're going to talk about proportions. Proportions. Now, what is a proportion? A proportion is when you have a situation where the relationship between two numerical values or two numbers is the same as the relationship between two other numbers. So the relationship between two numbers is equal to the relationship between two other numbers. Again, this is a very important concept. This is a very important concept for us to grasp. The relationship between two numbers is the same as the relationship between another two numbers. Notice I didn't say that the numbers are the same. It's about the relationship between the numbers. The relationship can be the same while all the numbers can be different, right? But it's about the relationship between two numbers that are represented as a fraction and the relationship between two other numbers that are represented as a fraction. All right, let's get into this next problem. So you'll see the problem in the description section underneath of the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you like this video also. All right, now I'm going to read the problem. The problem says, find the cost of a quarter pound of crackers if 1 pound costs $1.79. Find the cost of a quarter pound of crackers if 1 pound costs $1.79. Now, before we go on, I want to make sure everybody understands what fractions are and as a concept. What does 1/4 pound mean? A quarter pound means this. If you take a pound of something and you divided that pound up into 4 equal parts. Equal. The operative word is equal. So if you take a pound, divide it up into 4 equal parts, each of those parts is 1/4 or 1/4. That's why the denominator in the fraction is a 4, because we're dividing up an object or an item into 4 equal parts. So however many equal parts you're creating, that is what your denominator is going to be. Now, the denominator, of course, is the bottom number in a fraction. The top number tells me how many of those pieces you have or you're focused on right now. So if we have 1/4, that means we're focused on one of those 4 equal pieces. There are 4 equal pieces altogether. We are focused on one of them. 4 equal pieces altogether. That's our denominator. We are focused on one. That's our numerator. All right. Now, we're going to create a proportion, because when you see a problem where we're referring to a relationship between something and then we're trying to figure out a missing number, because it says find the cost. That's a missing number. We know that a 1 pound costs $1.79. So we have a weight and a cost when we have a pound and $1.79. But then when it comes to a quarter pound, we don't know the cost. So we're missing the cost when we deal with a quarter pound. So set up your proportion. In this particular problem, and there are a whole lot of different types of proportions we can have, but in this particular problem, the proportion is like this. Weight over cost is equal to weight over cost. And I draw my arrow because that's where I'm going to show my work at. But that's the proportion. Well, that's one way to write the proportion. That's not the only way to write it, but that's the way I'm choosing to write it, right? Weight divided by cost is equal to weight divided by cost. Remember what I said in the beginning of this video? A proportion is where you have equal relationships. So the relationship between two things is the same as the relationship between two other things. All right? Now, let's take the information from the problem and create a proportion so we can actually answer this question. Now, this problem says that 1 pound of crackers costs $1.79. And this says weight over money, weight over cost, weight over money. So we're going to put 1 pound, right? 1 over 1.79, right? That's going to represent this fraction right here, or this ratio. That's another word I'm going to throw out there. A proportion is made up of two ratios that are equal to each other, right? Because a fraction and a ratio are the same thing, basically, right? Then we're going to put our equal sign. Because look, this is going to be based on this, right? So now, the other weight we know is 1/4 pound. So we're going to put 1/4. Now, I know what you're about to say. Oh, how you going to have a fraction inside of a fraction? That happens often. This is called a complex fraction. Complex fraction. Write that down in your notes. Complex fraction. That's when you got a fraction inside of a fraction, right? It's called a complex fraction. But we're going to treat it the same way. I'm going to show you in a minute. Now, what's the cost of 1/4 pound of crackers? We don't know yet. That's the whole purpose of this problem. The problem says find the cost. Find the cost. Find the cost. So since we don't know it, let's give it a variable. Let's represent it with a letter. So now we're doing a little bit of algebra. All right? Don't get scared, though. It's manageable, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Let's use the letter C for cost. All right? Now, when you have a proportion, which we have here, 1 pound is worth $1.79. 1/4 pound is worth another price. But the relationship between these amounts is the same. The relationship between these two, is the same as the relationship between these two. Relationship between these two is the same as the relationship between these two. Again, relationship between these two is the same as the relationship between these two. All right? Now, we want to do something called solve. We want to solve this proportion. All right? Solve meaning figure out the value of the missing number. Right? Or figure out the value of this variable. We call this a variable. This letter, we call it a variable. Right? Because it varies. Right? In one problem, it could be this amount. Another problem, it could be another amount. It's a letter. Right? This is how we do this. I call this method the Malcolm X method. Why do I call it the Malcolm X method? Because we're going to go in an X formation. We're going to cross multiply in an X formation. See that X that I just drew? We're going to multiply 1 times C, which equals C. We're going to bring the equal sign down, and we're going to multiply $1.79 times 1/4. And now the fractions are going. So this simplifies the problem. The fractions are going using the Malcolm X method. Malcolm X method. All right, because we drew an X. That's what we had to do to get this. All right, so now I got C is equal to 1.79 times 1/4. Now, I did this calculation already using a calculator earlier, right? So $1.79 times 1/4, which is actually the same thing as doing $1.79 divided by 4, right? If you understand how to divide fractions, if you learned that already, you know they keep, change, flip, right? When you have a division problem, like let's say we had to do $1.79 divided by 4, we would just change it to a multiplication problem, and then you would change 4 into 1/4. You would change 4 into its reciprocal, which is 1/4. So this is going to be, let me check my notes, 0.4475, which is going to be 0.45. Now, why? Why is it 45 cents? Why? Because when we deal with money, we should only have 2 digits to the right of the decimal point. We shouldn't have 4 digits to the right of the decimal point. We can't have 1, 2, 3, 4 digits. When we deal with money, we got 2 digits to the right of the decimal point. That's how we deal with money, right? So where does this 5 come from? The 5 comes from the fact that this 4 goes up. Why does the 4 go up? Because to the right of it, this digit is a 7. Anytime you have a digit, and this now we get into rounding. These are the rules for rounding. To the right of it, anytime you have a digit that's 5 or greater, or 5, we say 5 and above, give it a shove. If it was a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9, this 4 goes up and becomes a 5. And then the other digits drop off. All right, the 7 and the 5, they drop off. We use them, well, we use the 7 really. The 5 got to go too. But we use the 7 to determine what's going to happen to the 4. Only one of two possible things can happen to the 4. Either the 4 is going to stay a 4 or it's going to go up and become a 5. Either it's going to stay a 4 or it's going to become a 5. Stay a 4 or become a 5. Stay a 4 or become a 5, right? Because 7 is greater than 5, it's going up. This 4 goes up, rather. This 4 goes up and turns into a 5. So that means that a quarter pound of crackers is 45 cents. If 1 pound is $1.79, now remember what I said earlier. A proportion is when you have relationships between numbers that are the same. The relationship between 1 and $1.79 is the same as the relationship between 1/4 and 45 cents. Because $1.79 divided by 4, divided into 4 equal parts, would be 45 cents, approximately, right? So the relationship between 1/4 and 45 cents is the same as the relationship between 1 and $1.79. All right, so just keep that in mind. That's what a proportion is. And whenever you see a problem where you got a relationship between two things, and then you're trying to figure out a missing number, where you're trying to figure out, and there's an equal relationship with something else, right? Between another thing that you're given and something that's missing, use the proportion method or create a proportional equation, right? First set it up, identify what's going to go where. In this particular proportion, we got weight over cost is equal to weight over cost. And then you go into the problem, pull the numbers out, put the numbers where they belong. The 1 up top, because that's the weight, $1.79 on the bottom, that's the cost. And then in the other setup, in the other fraction or the other ratio, because remember I said fractions and ratios are the same thing. You put the weight on top, you put the cost on the bottom. All right, and then Malcolm X method. Some people call it the cross product property. I think that's kind of boring. That's kind of lame. I'd rather evoke the ancestor Malcolm X when we're doing our math. That's what I'd rather do, but that's just me though, right? But you see how I get down. I wear Carter G. Woodson t-shirts, But anyway, cross multiply using the Malcolm X method. That's how you get rid of the fractions, right? So then you got C. You take each product and put each product on one side of the equal sign. So the product of 1 and C goes on one side. Did I have to put it on the left? No, I could have put it on the right. It doesn't matter, just as long as the products are on opposite sides. The products of the diagonal multiplication must be on opposite sides. So 1 times C, if I put it over here, the C over here, that means 1.79 times 1/4 got to be over here. If I had put 1 times C over here, 1.79 times 1/4 would have to be over here. And then in this case, all I got to do is multiply. Like I said, I pull the calculator out because this problem is kind of messy. So yeah, I use a calculator. I got this decimal and then I round it. So that means that a quarter pound of crackers is 45 cents. All right. So these are good problems to practice with. Get familiar with proportions. Become good at proportions. Proportions will be very useful to you, in a lot of different types of problems. All right. So we're going to stop right there. Definitely go check out, do your research on Carter G. Woodson. There's biographies that's been written about him. Also, one of his most famous books, The Miseducation of the Negro, a very important book. Prior to that, he wrote The Education of the Negro, another important book, and he wrote several other books. The brother was a serious historian, so definitely check him out. Look into the organization that he founded, the Association for Studying, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, right? Definitely look into that organization as well. They do good work. They have conferences on an annual basis, and they are a good resource, right, for many things. All right, get some practice with proportions, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.